Hello everyone, welcome to another Watercolor John video. I know I haven't been posting that much, but I'm still trying to find the best way to videotape these things so they look good and you can actually see what I'm doing and things like that. So please bear with me. As soon as I actually get a good angle that I can do on a regular basis, then I'll have a lot more videos come out. In the meantime, we're going to do a nice simple watercolor landscape. We're going to do wet into wet sky here in a second. And then we're just going to do a few mountains, a little river probably, and then a little bit of foreground grass and maybe some, reeds and stuff coming out of the riverbank, and a nice little picture. So we're going to start out with wetting our sky. Now when you wet the sky, I'm using 140-pound cold pressed paper. And you don't have to use the 140, but I wouldn't go less. The next one down is 90. The way I've got it taped down, it probably would be okay, but it's going to buckle real bad on the 90, and it's not going to be as durable when you want to try and lift up color for highlights and stuff. So I would recommend not going any more than 140, any less rather. And if you want to go to 300, that's fine. You're just going to need more water to wet it because more will soak in before you do the sky. Now, the sky I'm going to put a little yellow ochre in there. There we go. And I don't want it real strong. I just want a little bit of a glow here and there. So I'm letting the wet paper kind of disperse it a bit. And then I'm going to go with some French ultramarine for the rest of the sky itself. And there. There we go. I want a little bit more in that upper right corner, make it a little darker. There we go. Okay, now we got a nice little glow. So what I'm going to do now is I want to lift off a little bit of clouds. So I'm going to take a little bit of paper towel, and you don't need a lot, just a little bit to absorb some of that water. I'm just going to crumple it up a little bit, and then kind of where I want the clouds to be. When you do it like this, especially with that yellow ochre in there, what's kind of nice is when you do the dabbing for the clouds like this, it really solidifies that glow with the rest of the sky. So it looks really good. There we go. Okay, now next thing I'm going to do is we're going to put in a mountain. And I think what we're going to do for the mountain is we are going to go with a nice Van Dyke brown mountain. Nothing special, but what we're going to do is we're going to make the mountain dark. Okay, and the reason for that, one, I prefer my paintings to be darker anyways. I don't like faint color. I like a little more richness to the color, as it were. And the other part of it is I want to be able to lift easily to get these highlights. And I'll show you what I mean as I go on with this. But if you look right now, this isn't as dark as I want. Okay, I'll give you a perfect example. Like right here, that's where a highlight's going to be. My sun will be coming from the top left this way. So this peak, and this will all be highlighted. Now here's not too bad with dark, but it needs to be a little darker. Here for sure, this definitely. If I take off this highlight here by removing some pigment, the rest of it is so light, you will still have to add more paint for a shadow color. But if you make the whole mountain dark to begin with, then you only pull the highlights and then the shadow colors are already in place. So let's go more dark paint. And basically, with watercolors, that's relatively easy. Less water, more pigment. That's really how it works. That's what I'm doing here. See how rich and dark this is getting now? There we go. There we go. Okay. Now, you don't have to, but I'm going to let this dry for a while before I take them highlights off. You don't, like I said, you don't have to. You can take them off when they're wet, Sometimes that's easier. I like doing it when it's dry because watercolors have a tendency to dry much lighter anyways. So if it's already dry, I can already know where my value is and if I have to increase or decrease. So that's why I wait. You can take them off at this stage. A lot of people do, but it's not necessary. So while that's drying, we're going to put in the distant little pasture here. And for that, I'm going to use a bit of little yellow ochre. It's funny too because yellow ochre isn't the prettiest color by itself when you look at it out of the tube, but it comes in so handy. And the yellow ochre was in the sky for that little glow. It's going to be here for this little thing. And I'm not leaving this yellow ochre by itself. I'm going to add a little hooker's green. Now, one of the reasons why I love watercolors is, as the late great Bob Ross used to say with oil paint, happy accidents. Now, look at what's happening. The mountains are still wet. Okay, we just did them and we put on extra color. Look at all these little blooms when the yellow ochre took over. And they're blending up into that. That is absolutely beautiful. We need some kind of foliage at the base of the mountains. And it did it on its own. The wet paint will travel into the wet paint and you get these beautiful little areas here. And then we'll put some dark green mixed with maybe a dark Mayan blue to put a little bit more after everything dries and we get highlights, and it's going to be beautiful. Okay, so now we're going to take a smaller brush, a little filbert. We're going to go with a little bit of hooker's green. Not a whole lot. I don't want to get rid of the yellow ochre. But what I'd want to do is I'm just throwing it down there. Okay. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to take, and I know a lot of people don't use them in watercolor, but I love using a bristle fan brush. That's what I mean here. It's not the real soft one. It doesn't hold much water, if any. It stays damp a little bit, but that's it. And what I like doing that for is this. I like doing the mixing, blending, whatever you want to call it. Okay. So I'm not getting rid of the yellow ochre. And I'm going right up to where those blooms started. But I'm doing a nice blend of yellow ochre and the hooker's green. And look how nice that is. Look how nice that is. Okay. Next thing, I'll go back to the big flat brush. And by the way, I don't use any of one specific brand of brushes. I'll use all kinds. The one I'm using at the moment is a brush that I learned about from Charles Evans. Charles Evans is a wonderful, beautiful artist. I mean, he does some gorgeous stuff. And he's also on YouTube. And he uses the Cotman brand watercolor brushes, and he swears by them. So I figured, I was watching his videos for about the 30th time because the stuff is so good. And I decided I was going to give him a try. And he's right. They're really good brushes. They hold together good. The reason I have this tape on for mine is because sometimes I get lazy and I'll leave them in water, and I didn't want the ferrule where the wood met to get messed up. So I just leave it. Sometimes I'll leave it in there, but I got this tape on to kind of keep the wood from getting, rotted and stuff if I forget I have a brush in there, which unfortunately I do. Okay, now we're going to go and we're going to make some water. We're going to make a little river, okay? And we're going to use dark Mayan blue. It's a real dark color, as you'll see here in a second. And we're going to use this for a lot of things in this paint. Well, not a lot, but more than one. There we go. Look how gorgeous that color is. Alrighty. A little bit more. Perspective 101. You start out small, narrow, and you get larger. You ever see those pictures they have in perspective books with railroad tracks? And where you're looking is wide. You have one railroad track on each side and you're standing in between. But as you look towards the horizon, it gets smaller and smaller to where it converges and it looks like it touches each other. Same principle. Narrow on one side, larger on the other side. And then your perspective is correct for your water. Okay, now while we're doing this, this is something a lot of artists say I agree with. I like to get the white of the paper covered. Just get it over with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my foreground grass, the base layer, and then all the white of the paper will be gone. And then as I'm doing that, my mountain should be dry enough where I can start lifting my color and putting on the highlights. So I'm just going to use Hooker's Green with a little bit of dark Mayan blue. It's a beautiful color together. We have Mayan blue in the river, and now we're going to have it in the foreground grass. And I don't know if I said this in this video or not, so if I'm repeating myself, I apologize. Wherever you put one color, you want to try and find another place, at least one other place, if not more, to put that color in your painting. It really brings a good unity to your painting. Now, as I'm getting closer to the front, I'm getting darker with the same color mixture, Hooker's Green and dark Mayan blue, just more of the dark Mayan blue. And the reason for that is the further in the distance things go, the less detail and the duller the color. Case in point, that's a dull color, but it works beautifully. Okay, these grasses are much duller than these grasses. This has the richer, darker colors here, and that gives your painting depth. Let's see here, clean up my brush. Make sure, you don't have to, but it does come in handy if you have 2 water jars. A dirty one to clean your brush, and then a good one, a clean one to add stuff onto, so to wet your brush to apply more paint. Okay, now everything's going to be drying for a while, so while that's happening, I'm going to be lifting color with the for the mountains. Now what I'm going to use is it's not a bristle brush, it's a synthetic, and it's actually a travel brush I found at Hobby Lobby. You get a pack of 3 of these in 3 different types of brushes for $19.99. I don't know if they still got them there. I've had these for about 2 years. And then that 40% off coupon, these are like 12 bucks. And I love these brushes. They're little Raphael precision brushes, they call them. And I actually have one set that I have in my studio and one set that I have in my travel case that I use because, like I said, I love them. So what's nice about them that I love is their bristles are really springy. And a springy bristle is really what you need for taking highlights out of anything. So we're going to get it a little wet, but dab it with the paper towel and make it damp. And then we're going to come and we're going to start to scrub paint out. And this is kind of a labor-intensive process. And you get it to where you got to highlight where you want it. But it is necessary. You have to have your highlights, your shadows and things like that to give a painting a little more believability. Now, the pattern that you use, that I'm doing here, can be what I'm doing now, completely random. There's no rhyme or reason, it's just where I want the highlights to show. So every highlight has a shadow behind it. Go. Hang on a second while I get another paper towel. You do go through paper towels and water a lot doing watercolors. But there's so much. I used to oil paint for a long time and I still do it on occasion. I mostly do soft pastels when I'm not doing watercolors. And those are they're messy. That's the only way to put it. There's no nice way to put it. And what's nice about watercolors is you can get away from the mess for a while. I love soft pastels, but you get that pastel chalk everywhere on your hands and everything else, and you go through a package of baby wipes on a regular basis. But I'll never stop using them. I absolutely love soft pastels. They're not my favorite. Watercolors is my favorite, but they're right up there. I do probably 80% work in watercolors, and another 20% in that. I'm not into oils anymore. I never was an acrylics fan. Some people do them really well and they look beautiful. I can't get that plasticky look out. So I don't really use them anymore. I did for a while. Jerry Arnell, he's been a professional artist for a long time, and he has TV shows, and he is one of the very few that I've seen that his acrylics are just absolutely breathtaking. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of artists that do acrylics well, but his are just, you look at his paintings and you're just in awe. Now, one of the things, if you're noticing, I'm not messing with these beautiful things that just happened because of the wonders of watercolor. I'm kind of putting my accents to where it won't really hurt it. I think I'm going to go there. Now, one other thing, and this is just a general rule of thumb, and the beauty part about painting is everything is a rule of thumb. You don't have to do anything. It's really up to you because you're the artist. You have your artistic license, they call it. When in art, as in a lot of things in life, less is more. So if you find yourself kind of picking at it, just stop, let it go. You don't want to overwork anything. So when in doubt, stop with a little work left to be done rather than overworking it. You can always make a minor adjustment here or there. So take it for what it's worth. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is I want to get, now I said it's got to be faint here in this background pasture, and you see this nice little hills that we kind of put in. These, I was going to put some dark green right here, but these just bloomed out so beautifully. I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow ochre to the bottom with the fan brush and just enhance that and not really put anything else there. I just love the way those came out. And you can tell, you can hear that I'm scrubbing, but it's real soft. I'm not, I'm not putting any pressure on it actually. I'm just letting the weight of the brush do the work. And if you notice, I'm not going straight across, I'm doing a little bit of an angle. And that's just basically to have the angle going down towards the river. Riverbanks are usually lower than the banks on top. Not always, but for the most part. Okay, filling in there. Now, one of the things that when you do the distant ground like I'm doing, one of the beautiful things you get at it, again, because of watercolors, and they're so absolutely wonderful, is you see how I'm putting yellow ochre down, but I'm also getting that green that I put down initially, the hooker's green. So they're not only blending together, but they're layering together, which is giving you a very realistic look. I mean, right now I'm in the western suburbs of Chicago, so if you look at my lawn, they got a lot of brown in it because we've had so darn much drought in July and so far in August. And most places, they're not going to have rain all the time unless you're somewhere in the south or Seattle or something. So you're going to have these bare patches, the green patches, the brown patches. So just to give you an idea, everything doesn't have to be exactly this, that, or the other thing. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap in with the fan brush with some dark Mayan blue and hooker's green right at the base of these blooms. Little foliage, and I'll show you what I mean. It's really going to make them pop because yellow ochre that bloomed out is really light. So let's get a little dark in there. See how that makes it pop out? Now you don't want too much. You don't want to overdo it. Again, less is more. But you just want the hint of it. And then scrub it in a bit. There you go. Okay, our background pasture, let's say. I don't know what that would be. Yeah, it's got to be a pasture, I would say. That's done. Okay, now, while we're thinking about it, you look at the way I do it, and a lot of people do it this way. You don't have to, but it just makes it easier. There are no exact rules that you must follow this, that, and the other thing, especially in watercolors. There's a lot of rules of thumb that you should follow, composition, color value, that type of thing. But everything is pretty much at your discretion. However, you do want to make life a whole lot easier on yourself as you're painting. So, what I normally do is I start from top to bottom, so sky to foreground, and then back to front. The sky obviously is the furthest back, then the mountains, then the pasture, which would probably be midground, same with the river, and then this is foreground. So the sky is done, the mountains are done, the back foliage up against the mountain is done, and the foreground, the midground, pasture is all done. So now we're going to work on highlighting the river, and then we'll take care of our foreground foliage with grasses and stuff like that. And then this will be a done painting. Now, I need you to just promise me you're going to keep quiet on this one. Don't tell anybody. But we're going to use white gouache. Yes, I know. We can get arrested by the watercolor police. And there are a lot of people that still believe you don't use anything white paint-wise except for the white of the paper you just used. I come from an oil background, and I love using white. Now, I don't use it on everything in watercolors. As you notice, we've gone through a good part of the painting and I haven't used it yet. But I am going to use it for little white caps here and there to show movement on my water. And then I will use it to make some pastel colors, mixing it with some of my other tube colors. Every once in a while, like something that's a little pastelish. If you use too much of the white gouache, it's going to look chalky. But if you use just a little bit, it'll still tint it enough to give it that pastel look without looking chalky. And it also depends on the colors you use. A lot of what I use is Daniel Smith. I'll show you my palette here before I do the river. A lot of people ask about it. This is my palette. And basically it's a little plastic tray I bought at Hobby Lobby for like $4. And then I've got yellow ochre, which is Sennelier. My Hooker's green, which is Winsor & Newton. And the orange is Holbein. And everything else is Daniel Smith. They're extra fine watercolors. And they're a real good paint. They're made here in the U.S., I think like in Washington State or something. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great watercolors out there, professional-wise. I like the Daniel Smith line. The Sennelier, like I said, is very good. Winsor & Newton, I mean, they've been making paint forever. They're very good. But, like I said, Daniel Smith is probably one of my more go-to paints. Okay, what we're going to do is again, less is more, so we don't want to overdo it. So we're just going to take a little bit. I don't know if you can see that on the brush tip. Yeah, I can see it. Just a little bit of paint. And you want to just make little dabs here and there. You don't want to overpower it. You want just the idea, suggestion of movement. And then, as you get to the wider part, you can make it a little bigger. Again, that whole perspective thing. Now, this is one of the reasons why I used the dark Mayan blue. It's one of the darkest blues I've ever seen. You know, maybe indigo or something else might be a little darker. But what I like about it, it's a dark, rich blue. And then, because it's so dark, you put your white little highlights on it and they show up beautifully. Now all of a sudden, we have movement on our river and all is good in the world. Okay, we'll get rid of the gouache, rinse out the brush. And basically gouache is nothing but watercolors that are opaque. They're just not transparent. There's a guy that's on YouTube, an artist, he's been doing it forever and he's exceptionally good. His name is James Gurney. And I think that's the name of his YouTube channel also. If you want to ever look at anything with gouache, he does other mediums too, but including watercolor, but his gouache paintings are just, I mean, they're photorealistic. The guy is incredible, the work he does. Okay, now, if you remember, Our foreground was a mixture of Hooker's green and our dark Mayan blue. But we need to lighten it up a little bit just to give it a little more oomph here in the foreground. We've got the nice rich dark, but I want a little bright. And the reason I want a little bright is if you look in the sky, we got a little bit of bright here, and we got a little bit of bright by the bank. We got a little bit of bright at the base of the mountains. So I want a little bit of bright down here. I'm not going to use yellow ochre for this, however. I'm going to stick with the green palette, and I'm going to use phthalo yellow green. And it's just going to lighten it up just a little bit. And what I'm doing is I'm putting a thin layer over it, so I'm still going to have the underneath layer. And it's basically like a glaze. But it's going to brighten it up enough where it's going to look really pretty. See how that goes? Now you got that little yellow in it that's giving it a little bit of brightness. And all of a sudden it looks really nice. Okay, now the next one is, if you enjoy using a fan brush, you're going to love it because that's what we're going to use for the rest of this painting. We are going to start first on the riverbank. And we are going to use the dark Mayan blue Hooker's green mixture. We're going to use that the rest of the day. So the first thing we're going to do is put in these. It really helps liven up a riverbank. And then a couple of big ones. And then you take that same mixture at the base. What it does is that's a nice way of solidifying what you just did. Okay? You incorporated it on the riverbank. Now you solidified it into the foreground grass. Okay? Now what we're going to do here, continue with this as some more grasses here and there. Basically, this is the way it is out in the wild. You got flat grass, you got big grass, you got everything all over the place. No rhyme or reason, it's just there. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take our Hansa Yellow Light, which is the lightest color I have other than the gouache, and we're going to just put that at the base of these. And what that's going to do is that's going to secure them to the painting. But you got to make sure you blend it. You don't leave any hard edges with them. Because you see how you got all these little bumps where I started? Well, those need to look like they're actually part of the landscape. So that's why I'm using this yellow. One, to keep it a little brighter. And two, I want everything to look like it's attached to the ground and not just standing up on its own waving hello. There we go. A little bit more yellow at the riverbank. And if you look at the motion I'm using, that's how I'm blending too. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of yellow and we're going to add the contrast to the dark Mayan blue Hooker's green. I think I said Hooker's green and the dark Mayan blue was going to the last color we're going to use. And if I did, I apologize. Because I'm going to use this everywhere. Just to highlights. Make everything stand out. There's a lot of important rules of thumbs in painting. One of them is contrast. You can't show light without dark and vice versa. Okay, I think we have a completed painting. There's probably a couple more details each person, depending on who they are, might want to do. And that's totally cool. Everybody's different. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this. And like I said, I'm going to let it dry and then I'll sign it. and then it's a finished painting. You know, put a matte on it and see how it looks. So anyways, you have a very good day, and I will see you on the next video.